The best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Yes, good evening. Good evening. Hello. I'm back. It is me, Nick Hayes, creator of Hayes Reviews, and I hope that you are doing very well out there. I hope you can hear me and I hope you can see me. Tonight is a very special night. This is my first night streaming in a whole week. I've had a week off, and I appreciate those of you who are back and the patience that you've afforded me during this time. I know it's been difficult not having me rambling into your ear holes reading from books for this last week, but I hope you made it through and you found other things to do and other people to listen to, and life carried on not too without too much sadness and stress, you know. But anyway, thank you for being here tonight. I'm back and I'm very excited. We're starting a new book tonight, and this is going to be the sixth book that we have read on this channel. So if you're new here or if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Lovely to have you here. If you like what you hear and see tonight, there's a lot more of it under the playlists tab on the YouTube channel, which I'll walk you through that. I'll tell you all about that in a moment. But yeah, good to have you here. So I hope you are doing well. I've had a really good week, and actually I had a few things I want to talk about. So I've actually written down on this piece of cardboard here, because there's things that I always want to say at the beginning of streams that I forget. So I'm going to say them now up front. One is that if you're watching this on the replay and you don't want to hear me waffle and you don't want to hear the preamble ramble, you just want to get straight to the book, there's a comment pinned underneath the video, and that will have the timestamps for the actual readings and the chapters that we're covering in tonight's live stream. So if you just want to go straight to that and you're watching this on the replay, go down to the top comment and you can hit the timestamp and jump straight ahead to the actual text itself. That's something that I always forget to say up front, because I don't put the timestamps in that comment until after we wrap the live stream. So I'm trying to remember to do that. So that's the first thing on my list. Second thing on my list is the guitar music, the mailing list. So you probably saw, if you were here prior to us kicking off the show, that there's a waiting screen and I was playing some acoustic music to you there. And that's just a little screen to pass the time while we share the link out and get people on the stream so that they can participate live. And I put a notice up there that I'm gathering email addresses and I'm creating a mailing list for Hayes Reviews. And the reason for this is I don't know how long my content or my channels will survive on Gulag Tube. We know that there is plenty of censorship going on here, and we're trying to not trigger the censorship bots. We're trying to skirt our way under the radar and operate without getting noticed. But you never know. You can get channels just totally deleted without any explanation or warning. And so if you like what we do and you want to stay in touch, then please consider shooting me an email, joining the mailing list. And as a thank you, as a token and a gesture of my appreciation, then I will send you a link to Mega, which is a website, file hosting website, and you can download a bundle of my lovingly crafted, homegrown, original, unreleased, authentic guitar music. I was going to say badly recorded guitar music, because I did, in fact, I've got my recording studio right here. It's all recorded on this very iPhone using the Voice Memos app. So that's why, for any of you audiophiles out there wondering why it sounds the way it does, it was literally recorded on a potato. But that doesn't mean that the feeling and the energy with which it was intended and created can't be transmitted and received. And I've had good feedback on that music bundle so far. And so if you're into acoustic music, then give that a whirl. There's over 3 hours of music in there. And you never know what you might find if you take the plunge and sign up to the mailing list and receive that little free gift. And that means we can stay in touch. If this channel ever gets nuked and I have to pop up somewhere else, I can let you know. By sending you an email saying, hey, I'm over here now. And then we can carry on doing the good work that we're doing here, because I think it's beneficial, it's edifying, it's uplifting, and it's empowering to be learning these kinds of things. So guitar music offer for joining the mailing list, that is there. And that'll be up again at the end of the stream tonight. So I've taken a week off. And I was just saying in the chat there that the reason that I had a week off is because I've been doing some plumbing. That's not literal plumbing. I'm not becoming the third Mario brother or anything like that. What it is I'm trying to upgrade and do some work on the Hayes Reviews infrastructure. So I'm upgrading the hardware. I've invested in a little bit of kit, which I'm hoping is going to be very beneficial to us moving forward. It's going to allow me to host a website, maybe a private chat room, maybe host my own content so we don't have to rely on the BST system, which stands for Big Surveillance Tech. BST also kind of sounds a bit like Beast System, right? It'd be good if we didn't have to rely on these platforms and we didn't have all our data being hoovered up by them, and we didn't have them using this data to feed their algorithms, which are going to be used in the technocratic hell world that they're trying to create around us. So I think if that's something you're interested in, then stick around. And that's what I've been working on. So we're working behind the scenes to get that up and running. I've got a beautiful, kind-hearted friend helping me with setting this up. So it's taking a bit of time because I'm doing a lot of learning, but it will be very much well worth it when it's done. So that's going to be ticking over on the days off when we're not live streaming. But that's why I had a week off to regroup after the end of the last book, to have a bit of downtime and to get that plumbing done. So watch this space for more information and news on that. And the last thing I wanted to say tonight is that we are, in fact, tonight multi-streaming. So I hope we are multi-streaming anyway. From what I can tell, the control panel here looks good. The numbers are ticking over. And so I think we are multi-streaming successfully. So let me go over to the other screen and we'll talk a little bit about that. So as you can see, the drum beat and the schedule that we're going to have moving forward now that we're starting a new book is going to be live on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays at 7 p.m. UK time. We're doing it 3 nights a week because this is a big book. We got a lot to get through, so we're going to have to go at a fair clip. But, don't be put off. If you miss one, that's cool. You can always catch up on the replay so long as our AI overlords at YouTube permit us to do so. But that's the schedule moving forward. Those 3 here. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out is this one here. This is another bit of plumbing that I did in the last week. And this is allmylinks.com, where all my links, it does what it says on the tin, can be found in one place. And so I've put that there. I've pinned it to the top of the YouTube chat, and I've put it there in my profile for people to find. And if you click on that, it will take you to this next page, which looks something like this. And so here you can see just everything, all the places where I am and where I do stuff. And so I've got these wiggling ones at the top, which is buy me a book in PayPal. If you so choose to support by sending me a bit of fiat currency, I will spend it on books most likely, but that is an option. But then we've got the other areas. So the Telegram, this is a group where we have lively chat and exchange of information. We share resources, book recommendations. We share books, secondhand books for sale when we find good deals. I got tipped off in there to a lot of good books actually. So we've got a chat going on there. That's also a place where I announce when I'm going live, and so you can stay up to date by joining Telegram. Instagram. That is where I make posts based around books in my library. I don't do massive amounts on Instagram, but I do different stuff there than I do on Telegram. I take pictures of books that I don't stream about or talk about, and I give you a little insight into the book, the index, the contents, and say a few words about those. So that's also a fun place to be. I'm slowly building that up, and I also announce on there when I'm doing live streams. YouTube, well, you probably know that because you're probably watching me on YouTube now, but I have a YouTube channel. But I've just opened a Rumble and an Odyssey. And if all is going well tonight, we should be streaming to both those platforms. So if you prefer the vibe and the energy over at either Odyssey or Rumble, you can consider subbing to me there and watching there because they tend to be a little less heavy-handed with the censorship. And they're just YouTube alternatives. They have all the functionality of YouTube, and they do the same thing that YouTube does, except they don't tend to wipe people's livelihoods out indiscriminately for telling the truth quite as much, although they probably do a bit of that, at least in Rumble's case. I'm not sure about Odyssey. I think they're pretty good as far as free speech goes. And then the next three ones, we've got some crypto addresses if you would like to throw me a bit of crypto. I don't really use it a lot, but I know that it's a thing these days. People like to throw it around, and some people have access to that rather than fiat. So feel free. Please, if you do that, let me know so that I can activate my cold storage wallet and make sure that is received properly. And then 3 links at the bottom. I don't use that much, but I have this Ko-fi link. I've never used that. I'm on Brighteon because this is a new blockchain-based thing that is apparently going to take off. So I made an account. And I just also made an account on whatever this is called nowadays. I don't know what to call it. But I made an account on there as well. So if you want to join any of these and follow, it's also a good way to stay in touch just in case this channel ever gets nuked. So that's pretty much it for housekeeping. And explaining where I've been for the last week. I hope that made sense. And if you are watching on Odyssey or Rumble, please chuck a comment in the chat just so I can tell if that's working or not, because I can't watch it and do it at the same time. But tonight, we're starting a new book. So we've done. Well, what have we done? We've done Romance of the Rothschilds by Ignatius Baller. That was a book from like 1913 or something. One of the oldest books I have in my collection. We read through the whole thing, hearing about this kind of puff piece about the Rothschilds and their amazing philanthropy and their amazing knack for business and all the wonderful qualities that all 5 of those Rothschild brothers possessed. Then we also read through H.G. Wells' The Open Conspiracy. This is a great book to be aware of in case people say, there's no conspiracy for a one world government, you crazy lunatic. You can be like, well, H.G. Wells wrote a book and it's literally called The Open Conspiracy. So how do you argue and discount that one? We also read a book by Bertrand Russell, and he is, funnily enough, going to pop up again tonight in the little intro. But his book was called Has Man a Future? And it was all about nuclear war, nuclear proliferation, a lot of fear-mongering, a lot of, I would say, propaganda in the build-up and the entry into the Cold War to get people nice and scared and afraid of these nuclear weapons that could annihilate and wipe everybody out all in a moment's notice. And then we also read Lusitania by Colin Simpson. So a key and critical event in the lead up to World War I. And a lot of shady stuff happening around there. The main takeaway being that the official narrative, the one that was given out to people via the mainstream media of the time, totally didn't match the events on the day. That is provable. And the investigation into the cause of the event was itself a complete charade and a whitewash. And that is very well documented. And a lot of names pop up in that book that you might not expect, but they're names that we are quickly becoming familiar with. And then finally, we did the Rockefeller Foundation by Raymond B. Fosdick. He was the president of the Rockefeller Foundation for between 10 and 30 years. And that was incredible. That was a really eye-opening book just to see the length and breadth and scope of the investments that foundation make, the hundreds of thousands of dollars and pounds that they were pouring into all different aspects of our culture, of our education system, of our medical system. They were all over the place, and they have had such an overwhelmingly powerful hand in shaping the world that we live in today. It is it beggars belief that it's not a household name for most people. It took me stumbling down the rabbit hole in 2020 to really hear about the Rockefellers and become wise to their incredible influence in world events. And so that was an eye-opening book because, as I said, it was the story of the Rockefeller Foundation in the words of the president. So that was the stuff they were happy to tell you about. And some of it was pretty alarming and quite revealing that back in 1953, when he wrote that book, he was admitting to funding some of these things. And it obviously wasn't controversial, and he didn't mind admitting to them. So that was the longest book we've done. But I have a feeling that tonight's book is going to be even longer. So I'll just quickly check the chat and make sure things are ticking over okay over there. Good evening, LJ. We've got Elizabeth and Gwen. Good evening. We've got Seeds or Cedes. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, so I apologize. We've got CESP. Hello again. And apparently I'm not working on Rumble. Oh, that is a shame. That is a shame, but it's not surprising given that this is the first time I'm trying to triple stream. To me, it looks like Rumble and Odyssey are working okay. But anyway, stick with what works. That is probably the best message right now, and we'll work out the other stuff later on. All right, so what is the book that we are starting today? Well, you probably already know that because I entitled this. It is the Milner Fabian Conspiracy. I'm just kidding. It's not this book. But this book I wanted to talk about because this is just to give you an example of why I got into the collecting of books and why it's so important to me and why I love it and what made me want to start the channel to share this passion and this enthusiasm. So this book is quite a hard one to find. There's not many copies of it available. And if you can find a copy of it, it might be $80, $90, pounds, euros, whatever currency you tend to trade in or be enslaved by. But this is one that I heard Jay Dyer talking about. And he did a series of videos where somebody told him about this book and he snapped up a copy and then he was diving into it and talking about it. So I thought, well, if Jay Dyer deems it worthwhile to have a copy, then I'm going to grab one, and then I've got it. And I haven't read it yet, but I have skimmed it and had a brief look into it. So the story about tonight's book starts here because when I grabbed this book, The Milner Fabian Conspiracy, I'd been learning about Milner. So Lord Milner, he was friends with Cecil Rhodes, and I don't know if friends is the right word, but he was a co-conspirator, let's say, with Cecil Rhodes. And Lord Milner had his kindergarten where he was recruiting young men and grooming them to be the people who would carry out the plans of Cecil Rhodes and the secret society, which he left money to the creation of in his will. Okay, so I knew this Milner part of the equation because I'd learned about him. I'd learned about him in Lord Milner's Second War, which is a book that I've got over there and that I've reviewed on this channel. So if you're interested in that, check that out. I'd also learned about Milner in the Hidden History book, The Secret Origins of the First World War, which I've also reviewed on this channel. So those two, very worth checking out. So I knew this part of the equation, but this Fabian part of the equation, I wasn't familiar with, and I wasn't sure what it meant. So I was happy to get this book and flick through sort of the intro just to find out a little bit about it. But you'll see the subtitle here is How an International Elite is Taking Over and Destroying Europe, America, and the World. Now, I don't know where you live or what things look like on the ground where you are, but is Europe, America, and the rest of the world being taken over and destroyed right now? You know, what do you think? I kind of know what I'm starting to feel about that question. And then a further subtitle on the inside is here: what can be done to restore justice, democracy, and freedom? So it sounds like he's got some solutions in the book. But if you go here, you can see that this is a copyright 2012 to 2017. This is the 5th edition of the book. So I don't know where the first to the 4th editions are. They're not. I haven't seen them available to buy anywhere. But we've got a contents page. And you can see the first thing is socialism. Now, this is going to be a big part of our introduction tonight. And then we've got the Fabian Conspiracy. Then we've got the Labour Party. Oh, okay. That's the British Labour Party, which is the Red Party here in the red-blue political system illusion. We've got the Council on Foreign Relations. So they popped up quite a bit in the Rockefeller Foundation book in terms of funding. And they are, as we know, the American wing of Chatham House, the Royal Institute for International Affairs. Now, we've got the UN scam, we've got the EU scam, immigration, multiculturalism, and Islamization. So I'm very excited to get into this book at some point. But what I did when I first got it, I went over here to the introduction and I read a little bit about why he wrote the book. And it says that this book is intended as a tribute as well as a sequel to the work of two great American historians and researchers, Carroll Quigley and Rose L. Martin, who wrote The Anglo-American Establishment in 1949 and Fabian Freeway 1966, respectively. So the first thing I thought when I read this was, Carroll Quigley, I know him. I've got his book. He wrote The Anglo-American Establishment, which is here. He also did Tragedy and Hope, which I learned a great deal about from Richard Grove. And then more recently, I've been learning a great deal about Tragedy and Hope from Melissa and the Alan Watt Cutting Through the Matrix book club. They are going through the book chapter by chapter and creating these extremely well put together hour and a half long lectures talking about the contents of that book. So that's a really good thing to be learning from. And Alan Watt himself mentions Carroll Quigley quite a bit. And I've been through this book, as you can see, a lot of tabs. And this really does name names. And we should read this one on the channel at some point. So I was familiar with Carroll Quigley, and I knew that he was a key author of the history of this kind of secret society stuff that was going on and that seemed to be at the historical, what's the word that I'm looking for? The beginning of all the agendas that were rolling out and really hit hard in 2020. So when I got this book and I saw Carroll Quigley's name at the beginning, alongside Rose L. Martin, who wrote Fabian Freeway, and I thought, okay, I've never heard of her and I've never heard of that book. I better get a copy. I better get me a copy of that, because if Jay Dyer is recommending this book and this person is reading Carroll Quigley and they also recommend Rose Martin, then I bet she had something very good and interesting to say. So then I went online, and that is how I came to be the proud and happy owner of this book here. And I did talk a little bit about this in one of the Rockefeller videos, because it's one of my favorite books in my collection, because it's just, I don't know, it's just got a good energy to it. And it's not a damp kind of smell. It's been in a dry place and well looked after. And it is also signed, which is really exciting. So this is the author has signed, Rose L. Martin. She signed it in September, which is the month I was born. And not only is it signed, and signed twice, in fact, but it is also a first printing. So I was really happy when I got hold of that, and I got a fair price for it. And I've been looking up today other copies that are available online, and the price has gone up. So believe me when I say now is a very good time to be getting books, investing a bit of cash in some of these rarer ones and these older ones. You know, take into account the wider context. We're heading into this situation where more and more content online is going to be AI generated, and it's going to muddy the waters, and more people are relying on things like Wikipedia, and their attention span is eroding, and books are really going to quickly become these artifacts that I think are going to be incredibly valuable. Just like vinyl made a comeback, just like even cassette tapes did to a certain extent. People are starting to realize, I think, that, oh, you know what, this digital world where everything is changing and nothing is permanent, actually it's not that good. And we actually like a bit of stability and permanence in life. And we can gain some of that by actually owning physical copies of things, rather than just digital copies of things, which, let's face it, you know, you pay money, you don't actually get anything in return. You're just getting pixels. And, you know, we rented a film from Amazon the other week, film that was hard to find on DVD, and it was £3.50 or whatever. And they let us watch it as much as we want for 48 hours and then cut off our access. It's just it's a crazy realm and world that we're heading into, with all this tech and all this control over data and all this charging people money for access to information, and it's wild. And a hedge against that is to have actual physical copies of books, which in my estimation, I think the value is going to go up. as time moves on. And that's already been borne out in some of the books that I've bought and collected over the last 4 years. Some of them I check from time to time to see what the going rate is for them, and they are going up. And this is really good. This works really well for me, because then I can justify to my wife why I keep buying loads of books. And I'm like, oh, well, it's an investment. You know, you'll thank me in the future when they're very expensive. But I'm not really looking at it like an investment. The main thing is to get the information and to have that and share it and bring that to other people. So very excited to be diving into this book tonight. Very excited to own this copy, and very blessed that it found its way into my life and I can share it with all of you on the stream. So a little chat is CESB saying Odyssey's working, but not Rumble. And then Elizabeth says Rumble didn't work for her either. All right, that's a shame, but I don't think there's anything we can do about it right now. Let's crack on, and we'll do it here on YouTube for the time being. So a little bit of an introduction. So this is, I don't want to be teaching people how to suck eggs, but I consider myself a layman. I'm not an expert in any of these things. I just happen to really like books. I happen to have got mildly obsessed and addicted with buying them over the last 4 years. And now I'm just in this position where, okay, I'm kind of learning this stuff as I go along. And that's kind of what I'm doing. So I have to check in from time to time with things like Wikipedia. And the problem with Wikipedia is this is the consensus, right? This is the consensus reality that they want everyone to believe and agree upon. And they want everyone to turn to Wikipedia whenever they don't know something and to take it as fact, as truth, as writ, that this is accurate and reflective of reality, when that is provably not the case. And Wikipedia is a mediocre resource at best, but it's a good jumping off point. It's great to go here, I should say, to find out what are we supposed to think about a given topic. And so I did that with socialism, because this book that we're going into, the subtitle is High Road to Socialism in the USA. I'll just flash that up here, just in case people are like, oh, why is Nick talking about socialism? Fabian Freeway, The High Road to Socialism in the USA. So there's a reason. So I went onto Wikipedia and I started reading a bit about socialism. And this is a massive page. There's so much stuff on here. But I think as setting the context for this reading, it's worth dwelling on it a little bit. So what is socialism? Well, it's characterized by social ownership of the means of production as opposed to private ownership. Okay, so it's a dialectic. And it's this question of, well, does an individual own something, or does it belong to everybody in the community? Okay. It describes the economic, political, and social theories and movements associated with the implementation of such systems. Social ownership can take various forms, including public, community, collective, cooperative, or employee. Traditionally, socialism is on the left wing of the political spectrum. Okay. Socialist politics have been internationalist and nationalist, organized through political parties and opposed to political politics, to party politics, at times overlapping with trade unions and other times independent and critical of them, and present in industrialized and developing nations. So this is kind of telling you that it's socialist politics are beyond a lot of dialectics themselves, right? It says they are internationalist and nationalist. It could be apolitical, but also political. It could be trade unions and independent of them. It could be industrialized or developing nations. So it's really a very overarching umbrella that applies and is relevant and is rolled out and used everywhere, no matter what the system, no matter what the income level, no matter what the first or second world, third world status of the place may be. Social democracy originated within the socialist movement, supporting economic and social interventions to promote social justice. So I think social justice will be a phrase that's probably familiar to many of the people watching this. It's been a hot topic in recent years and is really driving a wedge between different groups in society. Some people claiming that the sins of our ancestors make us liable for reparations in the current day, and these other kind of conversations such as this, the tearing down of statues, for example, who are involved in the slave trade and historically, the rewriting of history books to make them more inclusive. It's about social justice. Is really about groupthink. What group do you belong to? And your identity is not about who you are as a person and your individual characters and characteristics. It's about your group identity and the groups you belong to. So that's kind of what social justice deals with, groupthink. While retaining socialism as a long-term goal in the post-war period, social democracy embraced a mixed economy based on Keynesianism within a predominantly developed capitalist market economy and liberal democratic polity that expands state intervention to include income redistribution, regulation, and a welfare state. So this is what is to blame or to thank, depending on how you look at it, for the idea that we collect all this money from people and then we plan who it goes to and we use that to provide services to welfare, to people who need that sort of thing. And we redistribute the income according to what is right and good and proper and morally correct. And interestingly, it's based on Keynesianism. Now, if you are aware at all of Nigel Watson and his YouTube channel, he's an economics teacher, and he's spoken before about how Keynesianism is just one version of economics, and it is massively flawed. I mean, just look at the world today if you want to know why and why that is. But he said as an economics teacher, he was not allowed to teach competing versions of economics, right? So, for example, he wasn't allowed to teach the Austrian economics, which is a totally different way of doing things. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but Keynesianism is kind of the default version, the default economics that you get when you go to university or you study an A-level course here in the UK and so on. And you really have to go through all of that and then go off on your own to find the other economics thinkers and systems that have been developed, which are just excluded and not included in the mainstream economics education here. So I thought it was quite interesting that they've linked Keynesianism in to this definition and explanation of socialism. The socialist political movement includes political philosophies that originated in the revolutionary movements of the mid to late 18th century and out of concern for the social problems that socialists associated with capitalism. So this movement, this ethos, this way of thinking has capitalism in its sights. It is blaming capitalism for the problems and saying that these social problems are caused because of capitalism and therefore we need to do something about it. And notice that it is closely tied with revolutionary movements. Socialism has come to signify anti-capitalism and advocacy for a post-capitalist system based on some form of social ownership. By the early 1920s, communism and social democracy had become the two dominant political tendencies within the international socialist movement, with socialism itself becoming the most influential secular movement of the 20th century. Now, this is really critical and very interesting because the 20th century saw just unbelievable suffering and death. Just incredibly, unbelievably, staggeringly heartbreaking numbers, right? And it's not often talked about what ideologies went into making that possible. We get told that a certain guy with a mustache got a hold of some power back in Germany, and he did some damage, and that was the worst thing that happened in the 20th century. That was not the worst thing that happened in the 20th century by a long shot. There were other systems that were being rolled out and being used, which caused way more, provably way more death than the mustache man did. But it's left out of the history books and not talked about. And they touch on it a little bit in this article. But anyway, many socialists also adopted the causes of other social movements such as feminism, environmentalism, and progressivism. So I think we all are aware of the damage that these isms have done I've talked a bit about these two on my Hayes Reviews Live series, which can be found on the live tab on the YouTube channel here. Progressivism is just this sort of idea that change is good and we have to keep moving forward and changing things. And I'm not so clued up on progressivism, but certainly feminism and environmentalism, two massive cons that have done untold amounts of damage to people and continue to do so. So socialism experienced a resurgence in popularity in the 2010s, most prominently in the form of democratic socialism. So it's coming back. The etymology. The word socialism finds its root in the Latin sociare, and the related, more technical term in Roman and medieval law was societas. This latter word could mean the more legalistic idea of a consensual contract between free men. So I thought, I didn't know it had this root in a word that means contracting. Now, I'm not an expert on law, but I do know that the maritime law, which operates in most of our sort of Western countries, tends to entrap people by tricking them into establishing contracts. And I don't know a whole lot about common law versus maritime law. I know a little bit. It's a minefield, very hard to get your head around, and you need some deep, dedicated study to understand. And I shouldn't say it's a minefield just because I'm too dumb to understand it. I shouldn't put you off trying to study it and understand it. Go for it. I think more people do need to know and understand the difference between maritime contract law versus common law, law of the land, versus ecclesiastical law. That's another one as well. But I find it very tricky. But it's interesting here that socialism is rooted in this idea of contracting, of consensual contracting between free men. The initial use of socialism was claimed by Pierre Leroux, and Leroux was a follower of Henri de Saint-Simon, one of the founders of what would later be labeled utopian socialism. And, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, so anyone who's trying to bring about a utopia is probably going to cause a lot of damage along the way. Socialism contrasted with the liberal doctrine of individualism that emphasized the moral worth of the individual while stressing that people act or should act as if they are in isolation from one another. So it's setting itself apart against, so socialism is setting itself against individualism, and it's setting itself against capitalism as well. The original utopian socialists condemned this doctrine of individualism for failing to address social concerns during the Industrial Revolution, including poverty, oppression, and vast wealth inequality. So they're blaming these social ills on the fact that people are individualistic and the individual has value in society. Saint-Simon proposed economic planning, scientific administration, and the application of scientific understanding to the organization of society. So this is very much in line with the Julian Huxley, Aldous Huxley, H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, George Bernard Shaw type thinking that we need to remove all of the metaphysics and all the discussions of philosophy, and we just need science. Get rid of theology, get rid of spirituality, get rid of God, angels, demons, spirits. All of that stuff is bunk. Chuck it to one side, and we'll just have enlightened, rational, scientific humanism. And if you remember, or if you were here for the reading of the Rockefeller book, there was 2 chapters there on humanism, and I did a whole intro explaining what humanism is. And in a word, it's relativism. It's moral relativism, and that actually comes through later in this article as well. But here you can see that socialism is the original creators of the idea of socialism are advocating for this top-down scientific control of everything. And that is how things should go. So it's technocracy. And then it says here that it was not until after the Bolshevik Revolution that socialism was appropriated by Vladimir Lenin to mean a stage between capitalism and communism. That's really critical. That's super critical, and a lot of people don't know that. Lenin defined socialism as the midpoint, the place you go as you transform capitalism into communism, right? So very critical to bear that in mind. Socialism isn't something that you set up and then you stay in socialism and you roll it out and you use it. Socialism is the midpoint of the transformation, and you will carry on transforming until you get into communism. according to Lenin. According to the Oxford Handbook of Karl Marx, Marx used many terms to refer to a post-capitalist society. Positive humanism, right? There it is. So I told you in the Rockefeller Foundation, Fosdick wrote 2 chapters about humanism. And here we have it again, this humanism idea, which basically just comes down to humans should do whatever makes them happy, and which boils down to relativism. So socialism very much linked to humanism. And he says that these terms all refer to a post-capitalist society. Marx uses these terms to refer to a post-capitalist society, which is positive humanism, socialism, communism, realm of free individuality, and free association of producers. He used these terms completely interchangeably. The notion that socialism and communism are distinct historical stages is alien to his work. So there again, you have Karl Marx, who's using socialism and communism interchangeably, showing that you don't separate them. Right? Lenin says socialism, it just comes before communism is rolled out. And in Marx's view, they're the same thing. 2 sides of the same coin. Now, in Christian Europe, it says communists were believed to have adopted atheism. So now you've got it also setting itself up in tension with not only capitalism, not only individualism, but also against religion and God and theology and Christianity. Early socialism. Socialist models and ideas espousing common or public ownership have existed since antiquity. I just highlight that because maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. I don't know. But there's a fallacy named after this called like the antiquarian fallacy or something, and it's the fallacy that just because something's old and been around a long time, therefore it's better or good or valid or something. So that just struck me as possibly a antiquarian fallacy. I'm probably getting the name of that fallacy wrong, but I think you get where I'm coming from with that. The teachings of Jesus are frequently described as socialist, especially by Christian socialists. However, both socialists and non-socialists have disputed claims of Jesus being a socialist. So I don't know. I don't know where I would fall down on that. I'm not much of a scholar when it comes to Jesus' teachings. Although I do think reading the New Testament on the stream one day would be good, because I haven't read it before. Christian socialism was one of the founding threads of the British Labour Party. Now, how about that? I didn't know that. I knew that socialism and Labour and the British Labour Party were very closely linked, but I didn't know that Christian socialism. But I suppose that makes sense because back then it was pretty taboo to not be Christian and to not believe in God, wasn't it? Until they started rolling out and really pushing Darwinian evolution, and you had the likes of T.H. Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, pushing materialism, scientific materialism. We all evolved from pond scum, and therefore we're just all bags of chemicals and biological reactions in a mechanistic universe, and there's no meaning to anything or purpose to anything. So they had to push that and push that and push that. These families, the Huxleys and the Darwins and the Galtons, pushing that all the time, and Lord Bertrand Russell, in order to break down this sort of Christian worldview with a God and a human that's been endowed with the spark of the divine and a role as not curator but custodian of the other living things here in God's creation, right? The first advocates of socialism favored social leveling in order to create a meritocratic or technocratic society based on individual talent. So meritocratic to me sounds fair, right? If you're good at something, you work hard at something, and there's natural talent. Some people have certain aptitudes for some things, but not everyone has an aptitude for everything. Some people are going to be good at stuff, not much you can do about that. But having competition and having people rewarded according to how hard they work or how good a product they produce is a fairer way of doing things. But to lump meritocratic in with technocratic, I was a bit confused there. But interesting that the first advocates of socialism were pushing technocracy and a technocratic society. So I was kind of not surprised. Technocracy is ruled by scientific experts, and they'll use technological means to do that, including AI systems and algorithms to decide who gets to do what. and really dictate to you your access and the level to which you're allowed to participate in life. Henri de Saint-Simon was fascinated by the potential of science and technology and advocated a socialist society that would eliminate the disorderly aspects of capitalism based on equal opportunities. So he was fascinated by science and technology and the potential to eliminate equal opportunities. So this is where you get into equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity. Now, everyone, in my opinion, it's better that we all have the same opportunities to work, to earn, to grow food, to have a family, to get married, to settle down, to travel, to do what we want to do with the people we want to do. But no, he wants to get rid of equal opportunities using science and technology. So we should learn more about this guy at some point. Maybe we will. But for now, it's the first time I heard of him. But we could talk about him in one of our preamble rambles on a future video, perhaps. He sought a society in which each person was ranked according to his or her capacities. So that, to me, that sounds like meritocracy, but ranked, rewarded to his or her work. That also sounds reasonable, Okay, so there's loads more in this article, but a bit that I wanted to highlight, and then I think we'll move on, is here. The Fabian Society. So remember, this is Fabian Freeway that we're jumping into today. The Fabian Society is a British socialist organization established to advance socialism via gradualist and reformist means. So remember, socialism is set up in tension with capitalism, with individualism, and with theology or a Christian worldview. That's what the rest of the Wikipedia article just told us anyway. So the Fabian Society is a British organization established to advance socialism via gradualist and reformist means. In other words, this organization is established to get rid of capitalism, to get rid of individualism, and to get rid of Christianity by gradualist and reformist means. The society laid many foundations of the Labour Party, so that's the left-wing red team political party here in the UK, and subsequently affected the policies of states emerging from the decolonization of the British Empire, most notably India and Singapore. Originally, the Fabian Society was committed to the establishment of a socialist economy alongside a commitment to British imperialism as a progressive and modernizing force. So this is where you kind of get the overlap with Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner and his and their roundtable groups and their secret societies, which were created and aimed at this furthering and expanding of British imperialism. This is where those two things overlap. So it's interesting to me that the origins of the Labour Party overlap with the kind of things and people talked about in Quigley's Anglo-American establishment here. Later, the society functioned primarily as a think tank and is one of the 15 socialist societies affiliated with the Labour Party. So there's 15 other groups, socialist societies associated with the Labour Party here in England. And I don't even think that even tells us, I don't even think that's a... Oh, yeah, okay. So there's a link. So we'll explore that as well on a future preamble. But this term think tank, what is a think tank? Well, it's the shadow power. It's the people, the unelected people who steer things off. They're not in the news. They're not in the headlines. They're not wheeled out on chat shows. They're not talking to what's that goon called? Piers Morgan. These are the people, the brainy boffins, the elite, so-called elite. They think of themselves as elite. I think of them more like cowardly parasites. But they get together and they plan things way out into the future. Royal Institute for International Affairs, Chatham House here in the UK. You've got Council on Foreign Relations in America. This is another one of those. Brookings Institute is one that was funded by the Rockefellers that we talked about in a Rockefeller video on that playlist too. So that's a think tank. This is when you want to know who's doing it and who has the power. These are better places to look rather than the sort of not childish, the fairy tale for adults. That is politics. That's how I think of it. It's like fairy tales for adults. Okay, in the early 20th century, there's other articles linked here. One of them is world communism. So this is I haven't read this one, but world communism, global communism. People say, oh, there's no conspiracy for a global system of control, and it's like, well, why is there a Wikipedia article called world communism? And then just another curiosity that stood out to me was in 1909, the first kibbutz was established in Palestine by Russian Jewish immigrants. The kibbutz movement expanded through the 20th century following a doctrine of Zionist socialism. So socialism, there's also a flavor of socialism called Zionist socialism, which was quite curious to me as well. I think that might be, a few more bits down here. So this bit, the interwar period. So the Soviet Union, this whole part is about the Russian Revolution and how they actually rolled out this socialism, communism thing. What happened? 2 major famines. The first one had estimates between 1 and 10 million. Now, that is quite a gap, and they don't have any idea. I could 110 million, something like that. So I feel like there's a bit of fudging of the numbers there. They probably know it's like 9.9 million, and they're like, well, just try not to make it seem so bad. So let's just say it's between 1 and 10 million. Yep, but that was a famine in 1921 and 22. And then there was a second famine, which resulted in millions. So they don't even give you an estimate there or a range. They just say millions. So it could be like tens of millions, but they just say millions. So 2 famines. And then the experience with the famine led Lenin to replace war communism with new economic policy in 1921 to alleviate the shortages. And then this bit, under the NEP, the new economic policy, private ownership was allowed for small and medium-sized enterprises. So they rolled out socialism / communism because it's the same thing. They had a massive famine. Up to 10 million people died. And the solution was, we better give private ownership back to small and medium-sized enterprises. So lesson learned right there. It's tragic. I'm not laughing, but it's just the admission that in the article and the kind of macabre admission and sort of implicit revelation that this system of socialism and communism leads to, what it leads to here, and then what the solution is here. And yet, you still have people going around arguing against this. And we're in a system now that really, really, really pushes people away from this. And if you're being born today, the chances of you becoming a private owner of anything, you'll own nothing and you'll like it is the mantra in the world that they're going into. So quite a revealing little paragraph there in Wikipedia. And it says here, the Soviet economy was the modern world's first centrally planned economy. So very much worth bearing that in mind as we move forward. And I think that's all I highlighted. But as you can see, there is a heck of a lot more in here. And I didn't go through all of it. Oh, no, actually, I did highlight a bit here as well. Social and political theory. So this is really telling us about a little more about the ideology itself. The fundamental objective of socialism is to attain an advanced level of material production and therefore greater productivity, efficiency, and rationality as compared to capitalism and all previous systems. Productivity, efficiency, and rationality. Notice that they're not looking for happiness. They're not looking for security. They're not looking for job satisfaction. They're not trying to improve people's fulfillment. They're not trying to improve their relationships, their ability to have children and form community. No. We need productivity, efficiency, and rationality. That's what the world needs more of. Excuse me a moment. I've got that live stream nose itch that tends to happen. Speaking of noses, look at that fella. Early French socialist. Whoa, that's a whopper. Under the view that the expansion of human productive capability is the basis for the extension of freedom and equality in society. So we need to make human beings more productive, which means work them harder for longer and get more out of them. And that will give us more freedom and equality in society. Socialism holds that social mores, values, cultural traits, and economic practices are social creations. In other words, relativistic, because they're just man-made, and not the result of an immutable natural law. So this is the part where it sets itself up as in tension with God, because God created this place, and in doing so put into effect the physical and spiritual laws which govern everything that happens, right? And this is natural law. And so gravity, if you throw something, it'll go down, it'll be pulled down to the earth. But also the spiritual laws as well, which I'm not so up to speed on, and I can't explain them very well, so I won't. But I think there's something to that. Socialism wants to get rid of that. Nope. Everything is just socially created. It's a social construct. You hear this word, this phrase quite a lot. Gender is a social construct. But the object of their critique is man-made social systems. So this bit also stood out to me and made me laugh. So the object of the socialist critique is they're critiquing the man-made social systems because they give rise to observed social problems and efficiencies. And what's the answer to these man-made social systems? Well, another man-made social system, obviously. because the man-made social systems that we're critiquing have problems, but this man-made social system that we're advocating doesn't somehow. So work that one out. But here he is, Bertie Russell. So there he is. Look at that fella. Bertie Russell, often considered to be the father of analytical philosophy, he identified as a socialist. Socialists define freedom as a state of being where individuals are able to express their creativity unhindered by constraints of both material scarcity and coercive social institutions. Now, what do you interpret that as? I kind of interpret that as what is an unhindered creative expression? Does that mean I can think of disgusting things it might go, places it might go. There's modern art. There's pieces of art that are put in. People pay money to go and see, and they're put in art galleries around the world that are created using various bodily secretions, let's say, and liquids. That is socialism, that an unhindered creative expression, which is not constrained by a coercive social institution, maybe that might be a church or a school or a police station, a coercive social institute, a government. So open to interpretation is the point I'm trying to make. And I actually didn't go much further than this into the article. I think I've made my point, and I picked out some interesting key things. But as we scroll down, we can see we got Karl Marx, we got Einstein, all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot here, and I'm sure we will probably revisit this. Oh, anarchism, interesting. Didn't expect to see that there. We'll probably come back again and again as we move through the book. But look at that, lots to go at. So, Fabian Society. I've got this tab and one more, and then we will get into the book itself. So, thanks for sticking with me. Just going to have a sip. The Fabian Society. So, remember, we just read about this, actually, on the previous page. It's a British socialist organisation whose purpose is to advance the principles of social democracy and democratic socialism by a gradualist and reformist effort in democracies. Okay. And it wants to do this as opposed to having some sort of revolution, because they tend to be messy and people's heads get chopped off. And it's hard to control the revolution when people get to the streets with their pitchforks. So it's all about gradualism and reforming efforts. And what does gradualism require? Well, it requires long-term planning. It requires thinking about outcomes, thinking about potential scenarios, wargaming, exercises, predicting how people are going to behave, analyzing people, knowing the individual psychology, the group psychology, knowing the pressure points, the buttons to push to get people to go in a certain way, to behave a certain way. They gathered more information about us during the last 4 years based on our reactions and what we were saying online, and our reactions to the lockdowns and the rollout of the experimental injections. Then to me, it was a data gathering exercise. It was like, oh, let's see what happens if we roll out this thing globally. Let's see who resists, who who doesn't, who rolls over and takes it. Let's try this level of coercion and these rules in this country. Let's try this one and different set of coercion, different means of coercion and rules in this country over here. And then we'll gather all that data because everyone's sitting at home on their phones in front of their laptops speaking on Teams. They gather it all, they feed it in, and then they use that to inform their gradualist plans, right? That's just my theory on it. But they admit to thinking in a gradualist way, which means you're thinking long term. If you have to be thinking long term if you are doing things in a gradualist way. And it tells us, as one of the founding organizations of the Labour Representation Committee in 1900, and as an important influence upon the Labour Party which grew from it, the Fabian Society has had a powerful influence on British politics. Now, I would put it to, I have people in my family, we got an election coming up, in fact, and I have people in my family who vote Labour, and I would like to know if they have any awareness of this society at all. Any awareness at all. And if not, don't you think it would be a good thing to know about, because they have a powerful influence. And then, as we know, this society founded the LSE, the London School of Economics, in 1895, which just pops up all over the place. The members of the cowardly parasite class who are groomed to become the leaders that are public facing, that are in the news and on the podiums. The household names, right? They tend to go through the School of Economics, and we've talked before on this page, I think, about the graduates. But yes, this institution was founded by the Fabian Society, and I think I'm right in saying that 80% of its intake are from overseas, and that's here in England, London, England. Okay, so the last thing we want to have a look at is the Fabian window. What is the Fabian window? Well, it's a stained glass window depicting the founders of the Fabian Society as designed by George Bernard Shaw. If you don't know who he is, you got to find a video of him, which is on YouTube. And the video is him explaining how every few years people should have to stand in front of a panel and justify their existence. And if they can't do it, then ... then, that's the end for you. Maybe an injection or maybe a sterilization or something. There's a video of him saying that. So he designed this window, and it was stolen in 1978, and it reappeared in 2005. I want to know more about that whole story there. I mean, that's almost 30 years it went missing. Where was it? Who had it? How do you steal a window? And how come it just reappeared like in a puff of smoke at Sotheby's, which is some sort of shop? I don't know exactly. I think it's a shop. But the window was restored to display in the Shaw Library at the LSE in 2006 at a ceremony presided over by then Prime Minister Tony Blair. That old fella. Emphasizing New Labour's intellectual debt to the Fabians. So the British Labour Party have an intellectual debt to this group of people. And Tony Blair, the war criminal, the man who invaded Iraq, who is responsible for the deaths of I don't even know how many people, domestic and foreign, still out there, still getting lucrative speaking engagements, growing more evil looking by the day. He was there to unveil this window when it was returned, and here it is. Here's the window, and so there's quite a lot of very interesting details. We got on the top, remold it nearer to the heart's desire. So that sounds a lot like do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That sounds a lot like humanism, where just doing whatever makes you happy is the important thing. Now, if we zoom in, you'll see here. Can we zoom in? Is that it? Is that all we can do? No, we can do more. If you see here, this crest in the middle, that's their logo. That logo is literally a wolf, the black wolf there, with a sheepskin wrapped around it. Their logo is literally a wolf in sheep's clothing. But I'm sure they just want the best for people, So they've got a logo, a crest, in a shield here, the wolf in sheep's clothing. And we got the green and the red coloring, which reminds me of, Christmas. I wasn't sure what else that might signify, but if you've got any ideas, please let us know. And what they're doing is they've got the world here on an anvil and they're hammering it. They're remolding it according to their own heart's desire, is what it says. Remold it, remold the world nearer to the heart's desire. And they are wolves in sheep's clothing. Okay, we've got another crest shield here, which has pray devoutly, hammer stoutly. Okay. And then down here, members of the Fabian Society and a bunch of books, which I'm hoping we can zoom in on and get a closer look at. These look like books. Let's see. These are hard to read. Oh my God, that one says Minority Report. What the hell? Okay, let's have a look down here. So we got Fabian something and Fabian Facts and Essays. That says something about local government. That says History of Trade Unionism, maybe. That says Industrial Democracy. That says Minority Report on the Poor Law. Plays 1, pleasant. Plays 2, unpleasant. Puritans. Yeah, these are hard to read. I'm sure we could find somewhere online an explanation, but I'm just amazed that said Minority Report, given the Tom Cruise, is it Tom Cruise? Tom Cruise film where they have pre-crime, precognition, and they arrest people before they carry out the crimes. There's also a book here which says New Worlds for Old. So you've got the new world that they're trying to bring in. So incredibly telling and mysterious. Well, not that mysterious. It's kind of revealing and obvious what it's not that mysterious, is it? They're hammering the world to match their heart's desire, and they are wolves in sheep's clothing. And I think this might be George Bernard Shaw here, and maybe Sidney Webb. I'm not sure exactly. But yeah, that is the Fabian window, and there's a picture of Tony Blair standing in front of it, all happy and chuffed because it's, magically appeared in Sotheby's. So how about that? So that's my intro. That is my little preamble ramble, and I hope that was useful and sets the stage nicely for the reading that we're going to be doing. I'm just going to move some windows around and then have a sip and check in on the comments. Nobody could get Rumble working, is that right? If I check my... no, not that one. If I check this window, we go to this. Yeah, so if you look here... Oh, no, can you see that? No, you can't. What am I doing? All right, let me move this. If I share this screen, from what I can see, this is coming through on Rumble. So that's kind of weird. There's only me. It's only one person watching it though, which I suppose is me. Odyssey seems to be streaming all right as well. And then of course YouTube, that's working. But anyway, I don't know. And it doesn't matter. We can figure that out and have a look at it another time. It's all a learning process. Okay. Comments. Ooh, we've got quite a bit going on. Celine Lyon. I hope I'm getting it right now. I kept stumbling over your name last time quite a bit. The word government coming from the Greek gubernare, to control, and mente, the mind. Control the mind. Yeah. I learned that one from Mark Passio, and it tells you that they tell you right there, don't they? LJ, send me an email. Let me know if I didn't get it. I'll try again. I think I might have got it. Oh, that's the other thing I want to say. If you have sent me an email to join the mailing list, keep an eye on your junk folder in case my reply giving you the link to download the music has found its way in there. So do keep an eye on that. And if you haven't had a reply from me, email me again and I'll check that and send it out to you. I'm pretty sure I've managed to catch everybody who contacted me so far. CESP says, I still can't get into the Vatican archives. Oh, wouldn't it be good if we could, though? Wouldn't it be good if we could? Celine Lion says, comments are being blocked. That might be if you're trying to share links or Gulag Tube. So what do you expect? LJ says, makes me feel like I said or liked stuff too much during the last 4 years. To be clear, that's just my theory on things. My trying to understand what happened over the last few years. To me, if you look at it from the point of view of a data gathering exercise, we'll roll this thing out. We'll see how people respond, who kicks back, who fight, who resists. Now, because of the technology and the invasive nature of all this data gathering that goes on, they know exactly who went along with it and who didn't, who went to the marches in London and who stayed home, cowering with fear under their blanket because of invisible particles in the air that give you the sniffles and a cough. So, or whatever, and I agree that I got sick. People were getting sick. There was something going around. There was something that, I don't know if it was going around, but people were getting sick. Was it any more than usual? Was it, did the flu really disappear? There's so many questions. But one thing I am absolutely sure about is that they know now exactly who went along with it and who was bought in to that narrative and who was going, wait a second, this doesn't make any fucking sense. They at least know that much, right? Gwen says it's a fine art auction house, Nick. Oh, the place that I thought the window magically appeared. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that makes more sense. I don't know why I thought it was a supermarket. Oh, and yeah, Celine Lyon says it's a globe. Yeah, it is a globe, and there's a globe all over the place. They are globalists after all, right? Discern between truth and fiction. Hey, fiction. Hey, what's up, man? I know you. I recognize that thumbnail. What's in the top left of the Fabian Society mirror? Let me have a look for you, my friend. It is. Looks like a dude playing bagpipes, if I'm honest. But let's just bring that up quickly and have another look, see what you think. Oh, okay. I see. This thing here. So this looks like a letter with a stamp on it, and it says "Sec Phallison something Clements Inn, Strand, WC." So that's a letter with a stamp and an address on it. Good catch, yeah. And this is some sort of pulley system. So he's pulling on this, which is activating these bellows, and these bellows are pushing, are stoking that fire, which is lighting this gentleman's backside, and presumably giving him the energy to smack the world into shape with his hammer there. But this is like a furnace, isn't it? And maybe this is like heating up the hammers. Oh no! So this is red because this is red because you first you heat up the metal to make it malleable, and you heat it up till it's red hot, and then you whack it into shape you want it to be, right? So that's the furnace and the fire. They must have just pulled the earth out of there, the globe, and now they're whacking it. And they've got Asia and Africa on the front, which is curious, isn't it? For people whose society was founded in England, you think they might have England at the front and the center, but no, it looks like they're concentrating these hammer blows on Asia and Africa. Also, itself quite curious, but yeah, thanks for that question, my friend. Discern between truth and fiction. Be good to know more about this address, what's on it, and what is the significance of it. Definitely. All right, that will probably be enough preamble. I'm going to itch my nose, excuse me. It's really embarrassing that I have to scratch my nose on camera like this, but as the great late Tony Soprano says, what are you going to do? All right, we got Hermit Tramp. Nice. Welcome. Good to have you here. Hermit Tramp has some fantastic music on his channel. of his. Sorry, I don't know if you want this shout out or not, Hermit, but I'm doing it anyway. Acoustic guitar, singing, beautiful songs, vocals, very heartfelt, and I really enjoyed them. So anybody who's in the market for some tramp acoustic guitar music, then definitely head over there and check out his music because I enjoyed it. CESP says bending the world to their will. Yep, exactly. Discern between truth and fiction says you get used to it. Cool. Get used to what? Nose itching? Me itching my nose? Is that what you get used to? You probably do if you watch any number of my streams. Okay, let's get into the book. That's why we're all here, isn't it? And I'll try and make my other intros a little snappier. But I think it was good context. From my point of view, my own learning, I'm glad that I got that on the record. So now we can get into the book and see what it says. So this is the inscription. This is the author's message. Carol and Jean, and I think it says Sabre, I'm not sure. But with every good wish. That's a lovely message. Rose L. Martin. I don't know if there's anybody out there who analyzes handwriting. Be good to know what you can glean from this little sample. I practiced a lot to get my handwriting to a place that I liked it when I was growing up. And this is my little, you can have a sample. Anyone out there who's into analyzing handwriting, there you go. You can analyze that. That's my handwriting. I used to practice all kinds of different shapes of letters and stuff when I was at school and bored. But it's a shame, isn't it? Because nowadays a lot of children they've ditched handwriting, so they're not even doing it. So they don't even have any kind of handwriting which can be analyzed. That would be actually a good tool for fighting back, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, computers find it hard to read cursive, handwritten cursive. But they could be getting good at that these days. I don't know. Fabian Freeway, High Road to Socialism in the USA. So this is Rose L. Martin with a foreword by Lloyd Wright. And we've got a quote here from Matthew 6:24. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will sustain the one and despise the other. It says, to the memory of late Senator Pat McCarran. First printing 1966, all rights reserved, published by Heritage Foundation. And the nice thing is it doesn't have a warning in the front that says no part of this may be copied or reproduced or blah, 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 blah. So that's why I feel comfortable that we can read this one probably in its entirety without triggering any copyright trolls, you know. Celine Lyon says it proves that I'm human. Scratching my nose. Yeah, you see, an AI software algorithm generated creature well, not even a creature, is it? It's not even a real thing. But an AI piece of animation wouldn't scratch its nose like this. All right, so we got two parts in this book. Part one is Great Britain. Part two is the United States. And then there is quite a bit of appendices. That's almost 100 pages of appendices. And then there's an index of persons at the end. Bibliography, which is 20 pages long. Index of persons, that's going to be good to dive through. And some appendices that I bet are going to be very juicy and revealing. So we got the foreword, and then we'll probably make it through the first chapter, and then we'll see where we're at, time-wise. Don't want to tire everybody out on the first reading or make it so long that nobody can catch up or keep up. So we'll aim to get to the end of chapter 1. Foreword. The American people have been and are complacently unfamiliar with communism's helpmate, Fabian Socialism. For over 50 years, but especially since the middle 1930s, there have been insinuated into high places in our government at Washington men whose collaboration in this socialistic movement has been greatly responsible for breaking down our constitutional form of government and substituting, therefore, the socialist idea of centralized government. And remember the Wikipedia page we just read, which said the Soviet Union was the world's first centralized government. And remember what happened there? And remember what the solution was? Every loyal American should read this book. It is well documented and proves beyond doubt that those who have wielded such vast influence upon successive presidents, especially since Franklin Roosevelt, do not have a desire to retain the freedom of the individual and the free enterprise system, but rather seek to establish the very coercion from which our forefathers fled. The reader will be shocked when he comprehends that there are those in high places in government who are dedicated to this socialist movement. The ultimate objective of the Fabian socialist movement is no different than the ultimate objective of the communist movement. The gangsters in the Kremlin tell us they will bury us. George Bernard Shaw, one of the originators of the Fabian movement, puts it another way. He states, in effect, "When we come to power, you will do what we tell you, or we will shoot you." That's a hell of a quote, but there's no footnote here, unfortunately, to tell us where it comes from. To those who have an inquiring mind, and to those who wish to understand the tragedy of abandoning our form of government under which we prospered and under which our people have freedoms never enjoyed before in the history of the world, this book is a must. It will enlighten the American people, and it is hoped that a reaction will set in, demanding that the Walter Lippmanns, the Schlesingers, the Rostows, and a vast number of others disclosed in the book as Fabians be exposed for what they are, so that their influence on government will terminate. The author has rendered a great public service. Whether you agree or disagree with the conclusions or the philosophies enunciated herein, you cannot close your eyes to the documentation of the progress of this evil movement. And that's Lloyd Wright's foreword. Everything has a beginning. Everything has a beginning. This book tells how the Fabian socialist movement, which exists under many names in many places, began and grew in Britain, and how, under the guise of an innocent-looking reform movement, it became a ruling force in the United States as well. Started by a small group of middle-class revolutionaries in 19th century England, its respectable influence now pervades the English-speaking world, which is still largely unaware such a movement exists. In Britain, its present-day leaders control the Parliament and the ministries in the name of the Labour Party. In the United States, where its identity has been even more carefully concealed and where its practitioners are usually known as liberals rather than socialists, it has very nearly succeeded in reversing that movement of national independence which began in 1776. Originally advancing with the slow but steady gait of a tortoise on a country road, Fabian socialism has now adapted itself comfortably to a high-speed age and attempts to lead the free world with unprecedented velocity towards a financial, military, and moral breakdown of which world communism is the only logical beneficiary. Still carefully restricted in size and as shy of inspection as the keepers of the Soviet missile sites, the parent Fabian Society of London is today what it has always been, a revolutionary secret society, behind a beguiling false front of benevolence and learning. One of the traits of a secret society is that a handful of its officers and publicists may be known, while the majority of its followers remain as hidden as its operations. Let no one tell you the Fabian Society has faded or is only a pale relic of a bygone day. Let no one tell you it is mild, gentle, or harmless. Here is the evidence that it has neither declined nor passed away, even if it sometimes chooses to play dead. It is not that the Fabian Society is dead, but that our own world is threatened with death. Nearly all the conditions necessary for such demise have been set up, including the barefaced announcement that God is dead. In spite of outward semblances of prosperity and freedom, the America we have known and think we still possess lies gasping, its constitutional separation of powers blurred, its wealth expended in the vain hope of nourishing a largely hostile world, its military security endangered by invisible civilian planners and irresponsible brokers of disarmament, its union, which was its strength, crumbled into a powder of racial minorities and special interest groups. Altogether, this no longer spells creeping socialism, but onrushing socialism, of which communism is merely the final stage. Incredible? Not to those who have kept their eyes open and their senses alert, instead of being anesthetized by slogans or lulled by promises of perpetual affluence. If the tortoise was once an appropriate symbol, a speedier and deadlier device would be suitable for today's faster-moving Fabian socialism, effective leader of the Socialist International. And if the turtle's obscure trail once seemed the proper path, the multi-lane highway or freeway is the avenue today. Indeed, executive-type socialist errand boys, diplomats, and hatchet men in a hurry range modern America's freeways, impatiently carrying out the schemes of unseen Fabian master planners, redeveloping American cities, reorganizing local governments along regional lines, keeping the farmer relatively happy despite the trend towards a collectivized agriculture. So, instead of the tortoise and its tortuous trail, we have the fast car and the freeway. How did all this come about? To understand, we must go back to New York's Turtle Bay of the 1920s, and then back a greater number of years to a certain modest parlour in one of London's less fashionable streets, where a few brash young people met on a certain evening to plan a new life, and then we must follow through from there. Rose L. Martin, Los Angeles, 1966. Chapter 1. Make haste slowly. Introduction. As a very young college graduate, searching for literary employment in the New York City of the middle 1920s, the author of this book happened to discover a colony called Turtle Bay. It included about a dozen remodeled townhouses on East 48th and 49th Streets, arranged for gracious living before the phrase was current. One of the first modern restorations in the 40s and 50s near the East River, it bloomed unexpectedly in a neighborhood of tenements and abandoned breweries. Evidently, its builders were versed in the colonial history of Manhattan Island, when the entire region consisting of a few large farms had been known as Turtle Bay. For its 20th century revivalists, the name had a double meaning. The colony was planned by Mrs. John W. Martin, the former Prestonia man, wife of a British Fabian socialist who had transferred his activities to the United States before the turn of the century. And there's a footnote here. It's actually like a downward dagger. The colony real estate was owned by Mrs. Walton Martin, née Charlotte Honeywell, also of Boston, not a relative of Prestonia, but also thought to be a founder. Founded as a quiet haven for a little group of serious thinkers, the Turtle Bay Restoration listed among its early settlers the Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Ernest Poole and several editors of the New Republic. There was Philip Littell, whose family once owned the Living Age in Boston, Francis Hackett, popular Anglo-Irish biographer and book critic, and a perennial summer and fall tenant on leave from the University of Chicago English Department, Robert Morse Lovett. Some had permanent summer cottages, and others were recurrent weekend guests at Cornish, New Hampshire in the White Mountains, where they fraternized annually with Harvard alumni Edward Burling Sr. and George M. Rubley, members of the same prosperous Washington law firm to which a future Secretary of State, Dean Acheson, belonged. All were charming, witty, well-bred, industrious, solvent, clearly superior persons, and all aware of the fact. The Harvard men, among them, typified in one way or another the revolt against New England Puritanism and utilized the Bible as a prime source of wit and humor. Philip Littell named his canary Onan because it scattered its seed. These were the American cousins of a species commonly cultivated in England by the Fabian Society. Because such individuals made socialism appear attractive as well as respectable, being socially beyond reproach, it would be difficult to attack them, however dubious the doctrines they favoured. Turtle Bay colonists of the 20s personally knew and admired a good many of the English Fabians, a fact frequently reflected in their writings. Ernest Poole had retired in 1918 from a 6-year term as vice president of the Intercollegiate Socialist Society, which changed its name in 1921 to the League for Industrial Democracy, and was hailed at its 40th anniversary dinner as America's Fabian Society. And there is a footnote for that, which is 40 years of education. New York League for Industrial Democracy, page 56. So that must be the name of a book at the bottom there. The chief activist among Turtle Bay residents was Robert Morse Lovett, whom the others affected to regard as an enfant terrible because of his pacifist stand during World War I. Besides serving as literary editor of the New Republic 6 months of the year, Lovett was an official of the American Civil Liberties Union and the League for Industrial Democracy, the latter occasionally listed in British Fabian Society literature among its overseas branches. He was also a trustee of the American Fund for Public Service, known as the Garland Fund, which financed a swarm of so-called liberal organizations hospitable both to socialists and covert communists, as well as to old-fashioned social reformers. In those days, the terms front organization and fellow traveller were still unknown. I'm not sure what fellow traveller means in this. I know what front organization means, but I'm not sure the relevance of fellow traveller there. If anyone knows, please let me know. A central feature of Turtle Bay was its pleasant Italian-style garden, shared by all the residents and wonderfully green in spring. Set in the flagstone walk was a small figure of a turtle in mosaic with the inscription Festina Lente, which means make haste slowly. To casual visitors, the turtle merely added a picturesque touch. Few recognised this unobtrusive little beast as an emblem of Britain's Fabian Society, which, since its formation in 1884, has preached and practiced a philosophy of achieving socialism by gradual means. Over the years to the present, the Fabian turtle has won a series of gradual victories that could hardly have been predicted in 1920, when the possibility of socialist control in England and the United States seemed remote to its own leaders. Even now, the results are hardly credible to the great majority of people in this country. In England, the Fabian Society, numbering at most 5,000 listed members, has succeeded in penetrating and permeating organisations, social movements, political parties, until today its influence pervades the whole fabric of daily life. So it sounds like they've penetrated the cabinets. At one time, with a Labour government in power, 10 cabinet ministers, including the Prime Minister, 35 undersecretaries and other officers of state, and 229 of 394 Labour Party members of Parliament held membership in the Fabian Society. And that is a quote from the General Election and After, which is a Fabian Research Series publication. So that's their own admission. It's not conspiracy theory. After World War II, Fabians presided, as England's Winston Churchill declined to do, over the liquidation of Britain's colonial empire. And today, through their control of opinion-forming groups at the highest levels, they play a powerful role in formulating foreign policy on both sides of the Atlantic. In the United States, the progress of the Fabian pilgrims, though more difficult to trace, has been impressive. On the whole, United States Fabians in public office have been more cautious than their British models about admitting that socialism is their goal. The gradualist and freewheeling character of the movement, plus the generally unsuspicious nature of the American people where gift horses are concerned, has allowed our native Fabian socialists to pursue their goals step by step without disclosing their direction. Their once slow and cautious pace has been gradually accelerated to a breakneck speed. In the past, Fabians were more successful in capturing administrative than legislative posts in the United States. They have left their mark on 3 decades of legislation, largely through a combination of executive pressure and the allure of free spending. The interpretive role of the judiciary and the power of executive decree have assumed new importance for Fabian-inspired officials unable to legislate socialism by more direct methods. With the multiplication of federal agencies and employees, 2,515. Oh, sorry. That number is 2,515,870 federal civilian employees in November 1962, as compared to 605,496 in June 1932. So that's a huge increase. So they've gone from 605,000 in 1932 all the way up to 2.5 million 30 years later. That's the growth in federal employees. The progress of Fabianism through government channels was further veiled. Not only the general public, but many public officials as well were confused and still remain so. The Romans had a word for it, obscurantism, which means the purposeful concealment of one's ultimate purpose. By September 1961, at least 36 high officials of the New Frontier administration were found to be past or present members of an Anglo-Fabian-inspired organization calling itself Americans for Democratic Action. The tally included 2 cabinet members, 3 White House aides, undersecretaries, and assistant secretaries in various departments of government, and holders of other policy-making posts ranging from ambassadors to the director of the Export-Import Bank. And there's a quote here that says, this is from a list compiled by Robert T. Hartman, Washington Bureau of the Los Angeles Times in September 1961. Americans sometimes wonder why so many members of a leftist elite occupy posts of great influence in Washington today. Others ask why United States spokesmen at home and abroad seem so often to be following policies counter to our traditional interests as a nation, and why, in Cold War operations, we so frequently lose by default to our declared mortal enemy, international communism. We will try to discover the honest answers to such puzzling questions. First, we will trace the movement represented by Americans for Democratic Action and related groups from its historic origin in British Fabianism to the present day. Second, we will make plain beyond the shadow of any future doubt the tactical service rendered by the Socialist International, with which the Fabian Society is allied in advancing the ultimate goals of the Communist International. A curious thing about our American Fabians, so reticent as public officials about admitting their socialist motivation, is that in private life they tend to express themselves rather freely in signed articles for publications reaching a limited circle of readers. With research, it becomes possible to demonstrate their socialist views in their own words. However, any attempts to confront them with the evidence or to interpret their programs in the light of their own confessed philosophy are promptly and vigorously denounced as unfair, if not downright wicked. In the past 30 years, a whole series of loaded epithets has been invented for that purpose, beginning with reactionary in the early 1930s and proceeding through fascist and McCarthyite to Birchite. Birchite? Is that Birchite or Birchit? I'm not sure. At present, right-wing extremist is the automatic catchword applied to any person who seeks to expose or oppose the socialist advance, and even to persons expressing the mildest sort of patriotic sentiments. That could have been written today, but this was 1966. That's crazy. Still, men must be judged by what they advocate. Arthur M. Schlesinger Jr., Pulitzer Prize winner and Harvard history professor, writing on the future of socialism for the Partisan Review in 1947, said, quote, "There seems to be no inherent obstacle to the gradual advance of socialism in the United States through a series of New Deals," end quote. Elsewhere, he describes the New Deal as, quote, "a process of backing into socialism," end quote. In 1949, Schlesinger was advocating liberal socialism and calling on a powerful state, quote, "to expand its main strength in determining the broad levels and conditions of economic activity," end quote. 3 years later, he insisted that those who called him a socialist were seeking to smear him, but he still asserted that he was a New Dealer. In 1954, he contributed what the Fabian News described as an important article on foreign policy to the Fabian International Review. From 1961 to 1964, Arthur Schlesinger, I'm really struggling with this guy's name, Schlesinger. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. was administrative assistant to the President of the United States. Since his case is by no means an isolated one, and since we have the example of England to show us what a well-placed group of dedicated socialists can accomplish in transforming the economic and political life of a nation, it would seem reasonable to inquire where all this is leading us. Where, indeed? In a rare moment of candor, Gus Hall, General Secretary of the Communist Party of the United States, told us just where. Addressing a capacity audience of University of California students at the off-campus YMCA in January 1962, Hall announced that the trend in the United States is towards socialism. Quote, not like in other countries, but based on America's background, and still socialism, end quote. And he predicted that, quote, the United States will move gradually from socialism to the higher state of communism, end quote. Though he was then under criminal indictment for refusing to register as a foreign agent, pursuant to provisions of the McCarran Act, Hall seemed to consider this no more than a passing annoyance. With socialists of established respectability sitting in high places today in many countries, the communists evidently feel they can afford to parry with a smile attacks on their own visible party organs. The Kremlin agents are unconcerned as long as an untouchable socialist elite continues with increasing speed to prepare this nation and others for what communists believe will be their own final victory. Military men will recognize the procedure as an elementary tactic in warfare. An infantry commander only orders his frontline troops into action after the territory to be occupied has been properly softened up by artillery and air power based behind the lines. In the worldwide theatre where Marxists wage class war, the communists can be regarded as frontline troops, while the socialists serve as the big guns in the rear, firing over the heads of the men in forward positions and enabling them, at a well-chosen moment, to seize their objective rapidly. It is a simple pattern, which any GI can recognize. Politically, it was the pattern of events in Czechoslovakia in the Hungary of Bela Kun. Even in Russia itself, where socialist governments prepared the ground for a communist seizure of power. Seen in this light, the value of the Socialist International to the Communist International becomes plain. Popular confusion on the subject has given rise to a dangerous myth, namely that a basic and irreconcilable enmity exists between socialists and communists. This is by no means true. Though superficially different and sometimes at odds about methods or timing, both are admittedly followers of the doctrines of Karl Marx or social democracy, and they go together like a horse and carriage. In every country not yet under communist control, the socialists remain communism's most potent and necessary allies. In fact, got to clear my throat. In fact, if they did not exist, the communists would have had to invent them. When Khrushchev insulted British Fabians, his insult was in all likelihood a calculated one. His gesture only heightened their respectability and enhanced their ability to promote Marxist programs piecemeal. A survey of the Fabian record will disclose how often Fabian policies have had the effect of serving communist objectives. It will show not only that Fabian tolerance for what was once called the Soviet experiment ensured its survival and expansion, but also that avowed communists have been personally tolerated in Fabian circles. Finally, it will reveal how often founders and leaders of the Fabian Society have, in their later years, openly travelled the road to Moscow. This survey of Fabian socialism is offered for people who feel they need to know where this country is heading and why. Since the movement is one about which many Americans are confused, And since an understanding and a healthy distrust of its activities seems vital to our survival as a nation, clarity is the prime objective. As to why this writer feels called upon to undertake a task so apt to invite abuse and reprisals from persons who may feel themselves touched by it, the laconic last words of a New York newspaper editor at the turn of the century can be cited. He had killed his wife, and asked why he did it, replied, "Somebody had to do it." Nice. All right, that is chapter 1. Make haste slowly. So that was really just an introductory chapter. I don't think we can really count that as chapter 1. It was an introductory chapter. Frank says, fellow travelers, this phrase also refers to those who are on the long march, the revolutionary journey towards communism. Thank you for that, Frank. That's really useful. I appreciate you chiming in and clarifying that for us. I'm just going to have a sip of water. So, I'm feeling like we could probably do another chapter, but I want to check how long it is before I commit to it. They set the stage, and we've got a few names. I'm not familiar with any of these names, actually. The name just mentioned in connection with Hungary, that name did pop up in the article on Wikipedia that I was scrolling through earlier just to prepare the introduction. Bela Kun. I think, again, I think this person escaped Hungary and then went and murdered a lot of Russians. From memory, that's what I learned about them. So the next chapter, if we were to go for it and read that now, it's only 10 pages. We can do another 10 pages, can't we? Yeah. LJ's lost connection. Well, I hope you get it again. All right, we'll do another 10 pages and then we'll call it a night. So here's the tortoise. So they have the symbol of the wolf in sheep's clothing, and I think we all know what that means. That doesn't really need much explanation. But their other symbol is this tortoise, and this is to catch that idea of gradualism and slow, long-term implementation of policies and changing policies in order to bring about communism. So chapter 1, Great Britain. Oh, is that it? Okay, I guess part 1, Great Britain. Chapter 2, Sowing the Wind. One chilly October evening in 1883, the same year, a Prussian-born war correspondent, freelance economist, and lifelong conspirator named Karl Marx died obscurely in London lodgings. 16 young Britishers met for a parlour discussion of the higher things of life. They were guests of a 26-year-old junior stockbroker, Edward R. Pease, who was bored with his job and with typical Victorian rectitude sought grounds for condemning it as immoral. All were young, earnest, ambitious, of middle-class origins and decent, if by no means glamorous, ancestry. All were groping for some sort of secular faith to replace the old God-given certainties as a basis for living and shaping their future careers. Like many restless young people of our own day, they hoped to find it in an atmosphere of mingled culture and social change. About half were personal friends of Pease, and the rest were members of a budding cultural group called the Nuova Vita. They had come to hear Thomas Davidson, a Scottish-born American and itinerant schoolmaster then visiting England, give a talk on the new life. Known as the Wandering Scholar, Davidson was a man of considerable learning and personal magnetism. He had toyed with the philosophy of Rosmini, an Italian priest who tried to fuse the systems of St. Thomas Aquinas and Hegel. At the moment, he was also flirting with a species of utopian socialism in the manner of Robert Owen, who favoured setting up ideal communities of choice and noble souls. With Owen, an Englishman who visited America, the term socialist first came into general use in 1835. When Davidson returned to the New World to preside at various impromptu summer schools and to found the Educational Alliance on New York City's Lower East Side, he had left behind him in London a lasting monument to his visit. From that casual gathering on October the 24th at 17 Osnaburg Street, the Fabian Society of London was born. Its character, however, was not immediately apparent. After a few meetings, at which the possibility of forming a religious-type community without benefit of religion was discussed, the group voted to remain in the world. Within a few years, the more bohemian elements from the Nuova Vita drifted away. Among them were Edward Carpenter, the future poet laureate of British socialism, and Havelock Ellis, harbinger of free love and forthright sexual discussion, whose impact on the morals of young intellectuals in his own time would prove similar to that of Freud after World War I. Leaders of the Fabian Society at a later date viewed Ellis uneasily as a threat to that image of respectability which was to prove their most highly prized asset. An examination of the early minutes book of the Fabian Society suggests that the name of Havelock Ellis has been carefully removed from the list of original signers of its credo. Scandals provoked by the unconventional love life of certain early socialist leaders evidently convinced the Fabian High Command that an appearance of prudery was preferable. From the outset, the 9 young men and women who remained to found the Fabian Society had grandiose plans. Quite simply, they wanted to change the world through a species of propaganda termed education, in inverted commas, which would lead to political action. To a rather astonishing degree, they have been successful. For over 3 generations, members and friends of the Fabian Society have dedicated themselves to promoting an anglicized version of Marxism. Started as a discussion club, the Society has become the most important and long-lived socialist organisation in England. Without advertising the fact, it has also assumed leadership of a worldwide socialist movement and is today the dominant influence in the Socialist International. Its originality lies in the techniques it has developed for permeating established institutions and penetrating political parties in order to win command of the machinery of power. Historically speaking, perhaps its most remarkable feat has been to endow social revolution with an aura of lofty respectability. The hole and corner beginnings of the Fabian Society offered no clue to its destiny. In the tranquil and prosperous British Empire of the early 1880s, the future of socialism appeared dim. The working classes were docile and church-going. The landed aristocracy was firmly entrenched. Only the middle class seemed apt for the socialist bait, particularly the younger intellectuals and professionals. Lacking any profound group loyalties, their religious convictions, shaken by popularized versions of Darwinism and scientific materialism, many yearned for some new creed to make life worth living. All over London, discussion clubs, debating clubs, study clubs sprang up and bloomed ephemerally. Movements like psychical research, vegetarianism, spiritism, and theosophy flourished for a decade or two and declined. Well, that's all making a comeback now, isn't it? Edward Pease, who in due time became the perennial General Secretary and chronicler of the Fabian Society, had dabbled in such diversions and found them disappointing. During a psychical research expedition to a haunted house in Hampstead, where he tried and failed to locate a ghost, he struck up a friendship with Frank Podmore, the man who subsequently provided the Fabian Society with a name and a motto. The name was symbolic and, like that of the conservative John Birch Society today, had no reference to the actual founders. There's a footnote here about the John Birch Society. This is an American membership group of dedicated anti-communists, anti-socialists who call themselves Americanists. It is described in a book by Robert Welch, The Blue Book of the John Birch Society, and that's 1966 publication as well. But it lent a touch of classical elegance to a tiny left-wing organisation, few of whose original members had attended England's better public schools and universities. The Fabian Society was named for Quintus Fabius Maximus, a Roman general and dictator who lived in the 3rd century BC. In his lifetime, Fabius was nicknamed Cunctator, the Delayer, because of his delaying tactics against Hannibal in the Second Punic War. By avoiding pitched battles at a time when Rome was weak, he won time for the Republic to build up its military strength. Though Fabius eventually met and defeated Hannibal at the Battle of Tarentum, he was not, in spite of what is often said today, the patient vanquisher of Hannibal. In fact, he died before Hannibal was decisively vanquished and Carthage destroyed. The final blow was dealt by a more aggressive and ruthless Roman, Scipio Africanus, a detail omitted from references to Fabius in the Society's literature. So they're already lying about their origins and in their origin story. In this respect, also, Fabius's strategic role resembles that of the society which has borrowed his name. One cannot help wondering how the Roman patriot would have responded to the far from patriotic question posed by a well-known early Fabian, Graham Wallace. When a man dies for his country, what does he die for? It's very interesting to me that they're all sort of not quite high up enough in the landed nobility to be important, but they're also not bottom level working class. Yet they're looking and reaching and grasping for something because the Darwinistic, scientific, materialistic worldview has left them kind of bereft, and they don't have a meaning and purpose and telos and logos in their lives, which Christianity would provide. And so they're kind of looking for, like I said in a previous stream, if you ditch, we are religious creatures, and I don't mean, I'm not going to go into that whole explanation again, but if you ditch like a religion, an organized religion of some kind, then you will put something in its place, whether you do that consciously or not. And these guys here are kind of going through that exact process that I very inexpertly described on one of the Rockefeller videos 2 weeks ago. But it's just interesting that's kind of echoed here in this book that we're reading now. The motto of the Fabian Society, published on page 1 of Fabian Tract number 1, stressed the value of delayed action. It stated, "For the right moment you must wait, as Fabius did most patiently when warring against Hannibal, though many censured his delays. But when the time comes, you must strike hard, as Fabius did, or your waiting will be in vain and fruitless." Time and repetition have given this motto a spurious patina of antiquity, but no one has ever been able to cite a Latin text as its source. On the cover of many a Fabian publication, it was shortened to read, quote, "I wait long, but when I strike hard." End quote. Usually it accompanied a sketch of an angry tortoise by the Fabian artist Walter Crane, which first appeared on a Fabian Christmas card and has since been reproduced on literally millions of Fabian tracts and pamphlets distributed throughout the English-speaking world. So the tortoise became the heraldic device of the society, emblem of persistence, longevity, slow and guarded progress towards a revolutionary goal. Not until the 1960s, for reasons best known to the Fabians themselves, did this telltale emblem abruptly cease to appear on the covers of most official Fabian publications. Both name and motto were adopted on January 4th, 1884, which may be presumed to be the actual founding date of the society. It was half a dozen years before the program and leadership assumed definitive shape. Meanwhile, the deliberate tempo and very British complexion of the new society distinguished it from the numerous small groups of foreign revolutionaries who took refuge in London throughout the 19th century and which invited surveillance by the police of several countries. Clever young Englishmen with a world to win obviously could not afford to be identified with foreign radicals, not if they hoped to attract any substantial following in Britain. And yet, contrary to general belief, the gradualist policy of the Fabians did not conflict essentially with the doctrines of the lately deceased leader of world socialism, Karl Marx. Had not Marx himself told German communists in 1850 that it would take years of civil strife and foreign wars not only to change existing conditions, but to change yourselves and make yourselves worthy of world power? At an open meeting in Amsterdam reported by the Leipzig Volksstaat of October the 2nd, 1872, Marx also said, "We know that we must take into consideration the institutions, the habits, and the customs of different regions, and we do not deny that there are countries like America, England, and, if I knew your institutions better, I would perhaps add Holland, where the workers can attain their objectives by peaceful means, but such is not the case in all other countries." At least one original leader of the Fabian movement had been definitely exposed to Marxist doctrines before joining the Society. In May 1884, when the organisation was still in its infancy, there appeared at its meetings an impertinent young Irishman with flame-red hair and beard, of whom nobody had yet heard. The name of this apparition was George Bernard Shaw, and he claimed to be looking for a debate. In September of the same year, he was admitted to membership, and the following January was elected to the Fabian executive. Shaw was then 28 years old, a freelance journalist living on an occasional stipend. For 9 years, he had drifted from one leftist group and radical colony in London to another. In later life, he was fond of telling how he was suddenly converted to socialism in 1882 as the result of hearing a London lecture by Henry George, the American single taxer and foe of landlords. Obviously, Shaw's experiences as a penniless youth in the metropolis had not disposed him to love landlords, but he was stretching the truth when he dated his interest in socialism from that lecture. As early as 1879, he had joined the Zethetical Society, an offshoot of the Dialectical Society formed to explore the dialectical materialism of Karl Marx, though its alleged purpose was to discuss the works of John Stuart Mill. Before coming to the Fabians, Shaw had also belonged to a Marxist reading circle, politely called the Hampstead Historical Club, and had been at least a candidate member of the militantly Marxist Social Democratic Federation, whose leader, Henry Myers Hindman, trailing clouds of costly cigar smoke, often visited Karl Marx at home. Thereafter, Shaw proceeded to school himself and others by making speeches on all the current issues about which he wished to be informed. For 12 years after joining the Society, he spoke as often as 3 times a week to audiences small and large, ranging from soapbox speeches on street corners to public debates in crowded halls, from formal papers before the nascent British Economic Association to 4-hour addresses at large open-air meetings. As his mentors, he preferred to cite Henry George or John Stuart Mill, the British utilitarian. Professor W.S. Jevons or David Ricardo, the early 19th century English economist, from whom Marx derived his theory of surplus value. Whether Shaw was ever personally acquainted with Karl Marx is not recorded. He could hardly have failed to see the ponderous Prussian in the reading room of the British Museum, where Marx was a fixture for nearly 30 years. Before and after joining the Fabians, Shaw too frequented the British Museum almost daily. There he read the first volume of Das Kapital in French and was vastly impressed by it. And there he became friendly with Marx's daughter, Eleanor, a dark, rather striking young socialist, working as a copyist in the reading room for 18 pence a day. It is hard to see how he could have avoided meeting her father, the more so because, throughout his long career, Shaw never displayed the least reticence about introducing himself to anyone he wished to know. Failure to mention meeting or even seeing a man whose work had impressed him so profoundly is a significant omission, especially on the part of a notorious name-dropper like Shaw. He refers casually to having once met Frederick Engels, Marx's alter ego, who remained in London to edit the posthumous portions of Das Kapital until his own death in 1892. The possibility has been raised, and remains an interesting subject for speculation, that George Bernard Shaw, the self-styled mountebank, with his Mephistophelian eyebrows and carefully cultivated air of diabolism, who in his later writings equated Jesus and Lenin as spiritual leaders, and that's from his preface on bosses, which is in Complete Plays, Volume 6, page 202, was commissioned by the fathers of Marxian socialists to help found a select company for the propagation and defense of their socialist views. Early in the game, Shaw confided to the German socialist Eduard Bernstein that he wanted the Fabians to be, quote, the Jesuits of socialism. That's quite a quote, isn't it? And that's from My Years of Exile by Eduard Bernstein, 1921, page 226. Any serious consideration of Fabian socialism must allow for the very real possibility that communists early saw their opportunity to introduce communism into America through the Anglo-Saxon tradition. Enter at stage left, the Fabian Society. In any event, Shaw came into the Fabian Society as if propelled, promptly pushed himself into a position of leadership where he remained for decades, and to the end of his days retained a paternal and financial interest in its affairs. This was true even after his meteoric success as a playwright and propagandist prevented him from participating in its day-to-day activities. The average American of today, who knows Shaw chiefly as the author of Pygmalion, on which the libretto of My Fair Lady is based, may be surprised to learn that socialism was the consuming passion of his rather anemic vegetarian life. I'm just going to have a sip. I really like the way she's describing this guy. Mephistophelian eyebrows and diabolism and his anemic vegetarian life. So the guy just needed a steak. That's all he was. Acidly outspoken on some matters, frankly blasphemous on others, the one subject on which he ever waxed sentimental was the Fabian Society. As a speaker, playwright, and essayist, Shaw did more than any other human being to establish the fiction that the polite conspiracy called Fabian socialism is a, quote, peaceful, constitutional, moral, and economical movement, end quote, needing nothing for its, quote, bloodless and benevolent realization except that the English people should understand and approve of it, end quote. And that's a quote from The Revolutionist's Handbook by Shaw, 7 plays with prefaces and notes, 1951. In January 1885, Shaw introduced a friend into the society whose contribution was to be as fateful as his own. This was Sidney Webb, a squat, dark, determined young clerk in the Colonial Office, with a photographic memory, a gift for assembling statistical data, and a taste for political manipulation. Because his father, a bookkeeper from Westminster, had once served as a committeeman for John Stuart Mill, Webb claimed to have unique knowledge that Mill had died a socialist. As a boy, Sidney Webb attended schools in Germany and Switzerland and presumably read German as fluently as English, yet he always took pains to disclaim any knowledge of or interest in the works of Karl Marx. Although Shaw noted in his diary that in August 1885, he and Webb together read the second volume of Das Kapital, just published in German. Webb's disclaimer can therefore be doubted, especially in view of his monumental, if masked, contribution to the practical advancement of Marxist programs in England during his lifetime, and the fact that his final work, written jointly with Mrs. Webb and the Soviet Foreign Office, was a paean to the new civilization of the Soviet Union. Even his loving wife in her diaries has charged Sidney with possessing a most robust conscience. Shaw and Webb had met in 1879 at the Zethetical Society, when both were exploring the uses of Marxian dialectic as a weapon in debate. As Fabians, they formed a two-man team pacing each other like a pair of well-gaited carriage horses. They collaborated smoothly in the production of pamphlets, essays, and reports, drafted plans for the political activity, and formulated internal and external policies of the society in advance of executive meetings. Sidney Webb supplied the direction, George Bernard Shaw the literary style. Soon they were joined by a third friend, Sidney Olivier, afterwards Lord Olivier, also a clerk in the Colonial Office, who, many years later, was to become the Fabian-inspired Secretary of State for India. Like Sidney Webb, Olivier proved to be a fertile source of confidential information gleaned from official contacts in government service, with the advent the next year of Graham Wallace, M.A., future missionary-in-chief of Fabian-type socialism in the United States. The first Fabian high command was complete. The facility with which that oddly assorted quartet captured and retained the society's top leadership bears some resemblance to the methods of Marxist-Leninist factions in front organizations of the 1930s. It suggests that the Fabian Society may, in fact, have been the first Marxist innocent front in history. True, members of the Fabian executive did not hesitate to damn the ghost of Karl Marx as they saw fit. With equal impunity, they, quote, damned each other's eyes 12 months of the year, yet remained loyal to the society and its secrets. Differences of opinion and verbal battles between individual Fabians were routine, yet did not preclude the factor of Fabian discipline. The half-humorous insults they tossed back and forth so lightly only served to veil the deadly seriousness of their common objectives. These objectives were broadly outlined in the basis, a credo to which every member from 1887 on was obliged to subscribe. With a single change, it survived until 1938, when it was recast to become the Constitution of the Society. All three versions began by announcing, quote, "The Fabian Society consists of socialists," end quote. The original basis went on to say, quote, "The Fabian Society therefore aims at the reorganization of society by the emancipation of land and industrial capital from individual and class ownership, and the vesting of them in the community for the general benefit. The Society accordingly works for the extinction of private property in land. The Society further works for the transfer to the community of such industrial capital as can conveniently be handled socially. For the attainment of these ends, the Fabian Society looks to the spread of socialist opinions and the social and political changes consequent thereon. It seeks to achieve these ends by the general dissemination of knowledge as to the relation between the individual and society in its economic, ethical, and political aspects." Like other movements, small in their beginnings but destined to cast a long shadow, the Fabian socialist movement, which was called a society, has never strayed from its original objectives. What the basis proposed was nothing less than social revolution, to be achieved by devious means over a period of time rather than by direct action. Violence as an ultimate measure was not renounced. It simply was not mentioned. Religion was not attacked. It was merely ignored. Cautiously phrased to disarm the unwary and to reassure any who might consider the term social revolution indiscreet, the basis was probably the most genteel war cry ever uttered, but it was a war cry for all that. I just lost my place. Oh, here. Propaganda and political action were the twin weapons by which Great Britain's unwritten constitution was to be subverted and the traditional liberties of Englishmen exchanged for a system of state socialism. More precise instructions for putting into effect the Fabian scheme for nationalisation by instalments were issued many years later in a volume by Sidney and Beatrice Webb, boldly entitled A Constitution for the Socialist Commonwealth of Great Britain. That'd be a good one to get hold of and read. For so ambitious a plan to be launched by so small a group must have seemed slightly absurd at the start. Certainly it caused no alarm in 1887 among authorised spokesmen of an empire on which the sun never set. How could a few conceited young people hope to overturn the basis of England's mercantile power and, in fact, of civilization itself? And yet, less than 20 years before, an equally obscure group of assorted radicals had contrived to set up the commune and ended by delivering Paris into the hands of the invading Prussian armies. That happened in France, however, a notoriously excitable country. Englishmen did things in a quite different fashion. From the start, Fabian leaders were fully aware of the stamina of the system they hoped to abolish. They did not imagine, any more than Karl Marx or Lenin did, that socialism could be achieved at one bound in a nation as strong as 19th century England. They did believe, however, that with some help, the people of Great Britain and eventually the world could be persuaded psychologically to accept socialism as inevitable. It might take a long while, a full 50 years or more, but Fabians were willing to work and wait. Their time to strike, and strike hard, would come later. In their first years, the Fabians displayed as much irritation as the bearded Prussian Karl Marx had displayed towards some of his more impatient followers. They were furious at Henry Myers Hindman and his openly Marxist Social Democratic Federation for predicting so positively that the worldwide social revolution would take place on July the 14th, 1889, the 100th anniversary of the fall of the Bastille. Failure of this widely advertised event to occur proved indirectly helpful to the early Fabian Society by bringing a number of embarrassed radicals and nervous liberals into the gradualist camp. Just before Christmas, the first edition of Fabian Essays, edited by Shaw and written by members of the Fabian Inner Circle, was published. On the strength of favourable book reviews by Fabian journalists, which are named underneath in that footnote, in such respected publications as the London Star, the Chronicle, and the Edinburgh Review, the essays attracted readers and stimulated some interest in socialism. In 1890, the Fabian Society was definitely on its way, and it has never stopped since. Boom. I'm glad we stuck in there and did that little bit of extra 10 pages. So, how about that? What do you think? I'm just going to take a sip and then I will check the comments, then we'll wrap it up. Can tell I've not done one of these for a week. My voice is getting all hoarse and raspy. Okay, Heidi, good evening. You got back. Hope your driving is going well. Celine Lyon says, Freemasons, Fabians, Jesuits, somebody needs to control the world, right? I suppose so. It's one of those jobs, isn't it? Why did you kill your wife? Somebody had to do it. It's astounding. So this is Celine Lyon again. It's astounding the level of blind faith and obedience that this international technocratic pyramid scheme has been able to achieve. Yeah, well said. I think that's a really good point. It is astounding. And just how people's questioning has been largely just switched off, turned off, just deactivated somehow. Heidi says, can't see me on Rumble. Right, we gotta look into this Rumble thing because it tells me I can see myself on there. So we'll see if the replay shows up on the channel. Maybe it will. Gwen says, G.K. Chesterton, when men choose not to believe in God, they do not thereafter believe in nothing. They then become capable of believing in anything. Celine Lyon says, but God is just a concept written by men. And Frank Lennon says, Fabians and Masons would fit well together. Secret society squared. Yeah. And I like your joke about the mistake as well. Yeah, but George Bernard Shaw would have calmed down and not been anywhere near as much of a problem if he was just eating a few steaks, maybe a couple of times a week, you know. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it there. We've done a good 2.5 hours. Hermit Tramp says, good start. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for being here. Hopefully you'll be here on Thursday for part 2. CESP says, enjoyed that very much. Well, you're very welcome. Cool. All right. I think we'll wrap it up there then. So that was the intro, a little bit about socialism, and I think very, very interesting. We got a lot of new names that I knew about Sidney and Beatrice Webb, and George Bernard Shaw. Sidney and Beatrice Webb are the founders of the London School of Economics, which pop up all over the place on the previous videos that we've been doing. and I think we're getting a good insight here into the mindset. But it is quite incredible that they've had such an influence as Rose Martin claims, considering, you know, their backgrounds. And I'm really excited to see if their circles kind of overlap with the Cecil Rhodes, Milner Roundtable, Milner's Kindergarten groups as well. That's going to be really interesting to see if those two groups meet, or if they're kind of acting separately in parallel, if they sort of unify and come together at some point. I'm very curious and eager to see that. Looks like we're getting quite a lot of resources as well. The footnotes at the bottom of the page, which I like, because we can go down there and check and not have to go to the back of the book all the time to check those references. So that's good. So far, I think we're onto a good one here. So Dave, take it easy. Thank you for being here. And Gwen as well. Have a lovely evening. I am going to play you out with a little bit of guitar music like we did in the intro. And Thursday, 7 p.m., we will be continuing. Do another 2 chapters, I think. So that's it. That's all I got to say right now. I sound like Nigel when I say that, don't I? That's all I got to say. So God bless. Take it easy. Take care of yourselves. And hopefully I'll see you all on Thursday. So God bless.